What's up, guys? It's your boy Santos the Destroyer, and I'm coming back at you with another What If, part 3 of What If Naruto had the 8 and 9 tails. So, a brief recap of where we were last time. We basically were on the Tsunade search mission, and we're at the point where Tsunade gets kidnapped by Orochimaru, and that's where we're going to pick up our story, is right there. So, Naruto continues his training for the Rasengan with little success as he has much more chakra, and his chakra control is much worse than is in canon. Orochimaru and Tsunade still have their same fight until Naruto and Jiraiya arrive. He still fails to summon anything, just like Jiraiya did. Just same in canon, basically. So canon goes the same until she subs the Rasengan into Kabuto, because since Kabuto still does the same injury as him that he did in canon, but since he has two tailed beasts rather than one, and also has the full power of Kurama, his healing is much, much accelerated than it was in canon. And basically, he gets the necklace just like he did in canon, and the three-way summoning deadlock happens. So that, which basically ends up in Orochimaru and Kabuto fleeing. So now we are on the Sasuke retrieval arc, which is when the hospital showdown still happens. I think Sasuke will even be more incentivized to leave as Naruto's rapidly gaining control over the Kyuubi and Hachibi chakra, which is 8 and 9 tails. So Sasuke would be more jealous, and Naruto's Rasengan, because Naruto's Rasengan would be much more powerful than it was in canon since it has much more chakra behind it. So Sasuke leaves with the Sound Forest in canon, because there's no reason that he wouldn't, as he'd see Naruto progressing by leaps and bounds. So the retrieval team, same team as in canon: Shikamaru, Neji, Choji, Kiba, Naruto, and then Rock Lee would come for support. All of the matchups would go the same. I still believe that despite a more powerful Naruto, Shikamaru would still go the one-on-one route as to just maximize their speed they could reach to Sasuke. So now we have the fated matchup, Naruto versus Kimimaro, which could go extremely, extremely interestingly, I must say, because you have a full power 8 tails plus 9 tails bloodlusted Naruto, because I think he'd be much more not reliant on the power, but more likely to use it, due to the fact that he's just grown up with it more, has been more comfortable with it, and he feels like he can control it better because he's had more specified training on it. I feel like he'd create much more shadow clones. He'd do the same thing he did in the manga, which was just overwhelm Kimimaro with shadow clones. I feel like he'd create much more shadow clones in addition to them of being higher quality. I think, but this is still Kimimaro we're talking about, so I believe Kimimaro would body the clones with little difficulty at all. So now we get to the classic Naruto versus Sasuke fight. Now this is where the canon completely flips. I mean, still Sasuke's shocked with when he puts the Chidori through Naruto, and Naruto doesn't immediately die from it. He heals rapidly, heals faster than he did in canon. And Sasuke is basically just shocked, and he has the entire "you're not the only one who's special" speech, and that goes along the same. Except Sasuke awakens his third Tomoe. Everything would go normal until he pile drives Naruto again into the rocks. But Naruto would be back out. He would come back much stronger and output much, much more chakra than he did before. I'd say roughly around 3-4 tails worth of chakra, even though he's in this one-tailed form. And I think with just this much power, Sasuke's just at too much of a disadvantage, even relying on Curse Mark Stage 3. He's just too overwhelmed, outmatched to beat Naruto in this state. I think Naruto would eventually just outlast Sasuke and take him back due to just the sheer volume of chakra he's outputting. Now, since Sasuke doesn't win this fight, that means Orochimaru doesn't get to train Sasuke. So now we have to discuss the 2.5-3 year time skip that happens and what happens during it. So I believe that Kakashi would just have another talk, or Kakashi combined with the 5th Hokage, combined with basically all Sasuke's mentor-like figures would have a long talk with Sasuke and say, "You have to stay here. We're just doing what's best for you," and stuff. And I feel like Sasuke would reluctantly agree as long as Tsunade made the promise that at some point in the future, they would make a specific Itachi pursuit team to just find Itachi and kill him. I think that's the only way he'd stay in the village, or he would just try and leave again. But I just bet Naruto would just know. Sasuke would know that Naruto's just too powerful at this point. So I feel like over a 2.5 year time skip, Sasuke and Kakashi would train a lot with each other, not making like trying to compensate the gaps that Sasuke had in the original canon, like his power gaps since Orochimaru gave him drugs and whatnot, would be refined with skill. However, I must say, I feel like since Sasuke would know how powerful Naruto is with all the chakra and how he faced that, I feel like Sasuke still would create Kirin just as a countermeasure to Naruto in case they ever had to fight each other again. So Sasuke would be more skilled. I think he'd still learn swordsmanship. He'd be more skilled, and he'd still have Kirin, and he'd have full mastery over his Sharingan. But he wouldn't be as physically strong, unless you said like he would train physicality. But I think he'd focus on skill over physicality, just knowing who Sasuke is as a person. And so now we get to Naruto's training, which I believe would be much different than in canon, as in I think he'd focus on controlling the 8 or 9 tails and maybe getting a specific relationship with one more over the other, like prioritizing, oh, I'm going to focus on the 8 tails rather than 9 tails. I believe he'd go for the 8 tails just more off that the 8 tails is just much more friendly towards him and it's easier to create a bond with it. So I would assume like maybe a year and a half is spent just trying to sync with the 8 tails and whatnot, and maybe the remainder is spent with the 9 tails, while also factoring in creating a big Balrog thing. I just want to say, like, as a general statement, that his training in this continuity, he would get more done than he would in the last continuity. So I believe he could. I think by this point in time, he'd be able to safely access a V2 cloak of the 8 tails and maybe 3 or 4 tails of the 9 tails just safely, because it'd be his training. Naruto's training would be um much more spent on controlling the tailed beasts rather than basically I don't know what he did in the original canon. He just learned all he did was come back and learn the big ball Rasengan. But it's gonna be much more focused. And I believe knowing Naruto as a character, he would have tried to find some way to mix the chakras of the 8 and 9 tails, but I don't think he'd be successful yet. Because there's just so much chakra for him to deal with at once, and it could possibly severely injure, if not kill him, if performed incorrectly. So now we get back to the homecoming, which Team 7 is still a thing. Gaara, I believe, still would be kidnapped, and from the eyes of the Akatsuki, Naruto would be seen as an extremely high-value target, since he has not one but 2 tailed beasts inside of him. But they would still go to the sand. I believe everything, the Chio fight would still stay the same. You could make the case that a V2 cloak with some of Kurama's chakra would be enough to take down Deidara, as Deidara was extremely battle damaged and fatigued, and I don't think that type of Naruto, like especially bloodlusted, wouldn't let Deidara get away. So we can safely assume that Deidara is killed off at this point, because Naruto and Kakashi Naruto with much more chakra and much more control over his Telebeast transformations it's just an end for a battle one Deidara, and there's just no situation unless he activates C0 that he can even attempt to defeat Kakashi and Naruto, but I don't think Naruto would even let it get to that phase. So Deidara is killed off. So Gaara is still brought back to life like in canon. Then the next arc you have after the Deidara and Sasori arc is which would never happen as Sasuke is with them. So the Akatsuki suppression mission would still happen because Akatsuki would still capture the 2 tails, and this is where Hidan and Asuma is killed off, and Naruto would not be forced, but would learn the Rasen Shuriken due to the fact that he would have to create a new jutsu because the Akatsuki were probably prioritizing him as a target. And next is Well, that goes the same as canon, except Naruto has a slightly easier time killing off Itachi and, I mean not Itachi, Kakuzu and Hidan because he has more chakra. And as a result, the Rasen Shuriken is much more dangerous. And now we have the Itachi Pursuit mission, which is interesting. This is another major change. Rather than this would be the Itachi Pursuit team that Tsunade promised Sasuke if he were to stay in the village. So you have the formation of the Itachi Pursuit team, which I believe would be Kakashi, Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, Kiba, Hinata, Shino. Maybe I wouldn't say Shikamaru yet because he still may be emotionally distressed after war. So maybe Neji, Lee and Guy. So you have two Jonin and then tons of Chunin plus Sasuke. So I think that's where we're gonna leave it off right now. The Itachi Pursuit team. And if you liked it, share, subscribe. I'm Santos the Destroyer, and I am out.